Before we get started, why don't you just introduce yourselves, what you do, what your company does, or a fun fact?
Oh, fun fact. Hi, I'm Ingrid Vandenhogen. I run products and innovation marketing at SAP. But prior to that, I've been CMO for about 3 different companies. So I'm doing something different. And a fun fact about me, I have a degree in math.
All right. Yes.
I don't know if that's a fun fact.
It was a lot of fun when I did it.
Then it's a fun fact. I don't have a fun fact. So my name is Kevin Burke. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Visa. And I think this is how we want a boardroom to look, right?
Yes.
Nice. I'm the diversity candidate here, and I'm delighted to be here. Thank you, Kat, for inviting me.
Great. My name is Sharon McIntyre. Following on the heels of the Canadian speakers, also Canadian, down from Calgary, Canada. My company is called Chaotix. Chaotic coming from the founder of Visa, D. Hawk. We named it after a word he came up with. I'm the CMO, and we're a tech marketing platform. We can talk a little bit more about that, that leverages crowdsourcing. Fun fact about me is I speak French. There you go.
Nice.
Oui.
Math and French.
En français.
I'm Francesca Schuler. I am the CMO at BevMo. For those that may not know, we are a specialty retailer of beer, wine, and spirits based on the West Coast. Fun fact, being in the beverage business, my 2 favorite beverages are tequila and champagne.
Awesome. All right.
Spectrum.
Yes, you chose well, everybody.
Tequila to
Good
math.
breakout already.
And you didn't bring any.
Next time.
So we're going to cover a range of topics from business to working with agencies to women in leadership to technology. And then we'll do our best to leave time at the end for questions. So why don't we get started? First topic that we were talking about for the session is disruption. And we know that in the industry that you all represent, in advertising, there's a tremendous amount of disruption going on, a lot of wonder about what is a digital agency and what is a traditional agency and what's the media mix and how is success measured. We wanted to hear from you all, from your perspective in your organizations, because they are so different from type of organization, maturity level in terms of how long the organization has been in business. What are you doing either from an embracing disruption or tackling disruption perspective?
Why don't I go?
Do you want to go?
So I'm at SAP. We're a 41-year-old company, primarily started in enterprise software, ERP systems. Some of you may not have heard of that, but it's basically we run many of the world's largest businesses out there. And traditionally, we sold to the CIO or the IT department, and it wasn't really a household name. So one of the things that we embarked upon a few years ago is you start to think, well, that's a limited market, and you look at what's going on in basically our daily lives. The IT guy, the developer, the CIO is a consumer. And I've been pushing this for a long time, which is we're not selling to an IT guy locked in a computer room anymore. We're now selling to a guy or a gal that's on a smartphone, on an iPad, that has kids at home, like we heard in the previous thing, that is a person, a consumer of goods. And so we started to change our marketing mix and our way in which we marketed and started telling stories about how SAP works in your everyday life. Did you know that we run like the Apple iTunes store? So that's tremendous, right? Some of the largest databases in the world run on SAP. And so we start to tell these stories about who we are as a company, and not the software, but what we're doing. So the big disruption for us was it's not about B2B, it's not about B2C. In fact, that always drove me nuts. And we were just talking about how advertising age is somewhere down here.
3.
On
Yes.
level 3, underneath. They just acquired or merged with B2B magazine, I think, because I think it's irrelevant now. It's about people. And the big disruption is how do you market to people? Because we all are consumers of all this stuff now that we have to make it simple and make it very clear about what it is you're getting. And you only have a few minutes to do that every minute of the day to market to them. That's the big disruption for us.
I was going to say for us, I mean, the single most disruptive thing that's happening to our business is mobile. And I think that's something that probably cuts across any business around the world. And let me just give you a few stats that we focus on every single day. Is there's over 6.5 billion mobile subscriptions in the world. About 1.2 billion people walk around with smartphones. And for us in payments, the thing that's really interesting is they take those devices and they do about 620 million searches every single day. And those searches lead to an action that leads to a transaction. And so for us, we have to think about, well, how do we get to consumers in the context of that new world, that window of the world that they look through, which is a mobile device. So for instance, we know that a consumer now takes that mobile device and the information that goes with it into a retail store. And they say 79% of consumers around the world say they would prefer to use that device, so do something on their mobile device, than to actually interact with another person, to actually interact with a sales clerk. And then 39% of those people say the reason they left the store without completing a purchase is because of that activity. So what we ask of ourselves first is that we think mobile first. When we write our briefs, we think about them through the lens of mobile. In fact, we ask our marketers to put their briefs in 140 characters or less, because if you can't tweet it, then you probably haven't honed it, you probably haven't crafted it to inspire creativity that will be delivered in the context of this new reality. And the other thing is we ask our agency partners to think the same way, to think mobile first. I mean, how many of you have ever concepted on a mobile device? I mean, think about how hard that would be. But that's how consumers view your content. And so when we see work from the agencies, we actually want to see it on a mobile device because that's how a consumer views their world.
And business people view it all on a mobile device too. So
Absolutely.
we're in the exact same position where mobile first is absolutely what we have to do.
Huge disruption.
Mm-hmm. So it's interesting because our company, we work both with customer brands and with agencies. And we're this interesting sort of hybrid intermediary where we work with companies as diverse as KPMG, so Big Four, to Procter & Gamble, Reckitt Benckiser, or Lego, as an example. And what we find is changing is how people gain insights. So the world of when you're developing a brand, I used to be a brand cop in a company, and I would work with an agency, right? And people don't own their brands anymore. It's the customer and the employees that own the brands, and so it should be. And so getting insights by having a few people in a room and doing a focus group, or doing that really horrible screener survey that we know people are just filling out the blanks to get the $2 to the Amazon card anyway. That world is just completely gone. And so for our company, it's that the brands are now owned by the consumer and the employees. And the way you get insights is to spend time. We know we can't all do home visits and test kitchens and things, but your mobile world that you just described, that's where we bring community together. And the most advanced agencies get it. They get digital. They understand we're not talking about online panels. We're talking about really living online and doing online ethnography and design thinking and creativity. So the disruption is the focus group is dead if you don't do it well. And picking random people to come to them, paying them a bit of money to answer questions about beer, those days are gone. And if you think that it's called social listening and sentiment analysis, I will tell you that the smartest brands know that that's where you start, but you don't end there. You cannot action an innovation in a company by listening on Facebook or in a chat room. It's a great place to start, but it's not a place to end. So people kind of laugh when you said you're about math. Marketing and advertising has got a lot about math.
It's a lot of
very
analytics.
Analytical. And if you're afraid of math, don't be. It's a lot of fun. Get involved in it. My undergrad is political philosophy, and I can do it, right? I went back to school, right? So get very mathy, but make it delightful and fun. Don't let the customer feel the math. You be mathy. That would be my experience.
Mm-hmm.
Well, our category is, we're a retailer, so we still are all about experiences, and we sell very fun products. I think the big disconnect that's existed in our category is if you go to a winery, how many people have been wine tasting up in Napa or Sonoma? A lot of people. Or if you go to a bar and have a cocktail, or if you watch a Sky Vodka TV commercial, those are all these awesome, great, fun, sexy experiences. And then you go down the wine aisle at Safeway and you're like, okay, this sucks. I mean, it really sucks. And so it does. It's overwhelming. It's ugly. You're like, where's my beautiful vineyard or the hot girl that was in the sky ad? So one of the things we're doing, and we're in a very old school industry that's highly regulated, but one of the things we're doing as a retailer is really trying to bring that experience of sort of on-premise or the winery magic into the four walls, which is hard, but we've launched a couple new store concepts that we're excited about and really try to bridge that gap because it's such a disconnect right now. And people love our brand. First question I got asked when I met Ingrid here is, did you bring me any product? So people love what we sell, but the experience in most cases is so disconnected. So we're really focused on how do you bring that magical experience to life in the four walls of a retailer. So it's fun, it's exciting.
That's awesome.
That's cool.
And online too.
And
So,
online, yeah.
Kevin, you talked about a brief in a tweet.
Yes.
Interesting.
Love that.
We ask that they not tweet the brief before we actually do the work.
That's
but,
okay. That's
I mean,
good.
it's a state
That's
of
good.
mind.
You always have to caveat,
It's
caveat that.
confidentiality, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about working with agencies. What, is there agencies spend, I'd say, an inordinate amount of time wondering how they can get into the CMO's office and what's the value they can bring. And on the creative directors panel this morning, the conversation was about creative directors getting more business savvy and getting into the CMO's office. But then you've got gatekeepers in the marketing organization. And on the agency side, you have a whole host of gatekeepers between creative and the CMO, all the account folks and everybody else. So what is it that the great agency partners do when they're with you? What makes a great agency meeting where you think we are cooking with gas versus they're cooked?
That's very true.
What is it?
It's a good question. I think, and not to oversimplify it, but I think it is and hopefully always will be an idea business. And I mean, for us, it's really, that's the key that unlocks any door is an idea. And an idea for us also needs to, as you said, needs to be grounded in the truth of the business and what we're trying to accomplish, and whether it's creating a consumer experience or whether it's, an idea on how to disrupt the way that we listen or how we change. I was actually at the ANA recently, and Beth Comstock said, she said when people say B2B, they say, they think boring to boring, which in fact, I mean, GE's a great example of how they've actually turned that on its head, and they create content that's very consumer oriented, yet still reaching out to businesses. And so again, come with ideas and every door will be unlocked.
I would agree. I think, if they're cooked, you know it almost immediately, where they're, it's just like, I'd like to go home now, or, can you please go home now? It really is when they really get you, when they really know who you are, and I'm not talking about me, when they get my business and they've kind of walked in my shoes or my brand, and then they start to expand into an idea that is just like beautiful, or just, it's just beyond description. And a guy wrote a book many years ago called Patterns of Software, and the concept that I loved in there was this idea of a quality without a name. Like when you know what it is, it's just there. And so it's almost like quality without a name, it's like when you see a mountain or something, you can't even describe it, or a beautiful sunset. So when people walk in and they're pitching you and it's like, it's just connected and just not working, you know it almost immediately, but when that beautiful image and idea comes out of somebody and they really get you, it's when they win. It's when they absolutely win, and everyone in the room kind of knows it, and you get a chill, because I get chills when it happens, because it does. So it's not about getting into the office, it's about having that exceptional idea, and they've done their work. They've done their homework.
Yeah, I agree. I would say a couple other things, though. I think a lot of it's understanding the business and being part of the day-to-day, because I've been in many agency discussions with lots of really good ideas, and they're like, that's great, and it's a chilling idea, but then you actually think through the reality, and you're like, this does not work, or it won't happen. And I think for me, it's a couple things. I think it's one, understanding the business. Our agency sits in our weekly business. We're in retail, so we move really quickly, and our agency sits in our business meeting every single Monday. And you cannot replace that. And then, so I think that just being connected, not just in the big picture business, but in the day-to-day really helps, builds credibility with the team. I think the other idea is, the other key point is sort of the belief in the yes and, because I think launching a perfect idea in the moment is really hard. The best ideas, I think, tend to be a collaborative and iterative process between client and agency. And so the agencies that embrace that yes and idea and don't sit there and get offended when someone on your team throws out something, even if it's a stupid idea, but sort of builds on it and takes it and it gets its own momentum, that is the winning partnership, I think. For me, the struggle is always when it's that perfect presentation and you make a comment, they're like, oh, no, don't touch our perfect idea that's on this paper. So I think it's really that understanding of the business, but willingness to roll up your sleeve and participate, as well as the ability creatively and strategically to just iterate organically and together in a really collaborative way. That
when they
makes
listen,
the best.
right? We heard that, listen,
In the last
right?
session, yeah.
In the last session, if they don't listen, I tune them out.
Right.
So immediately.
Agreed.
So they have to listen and iterate with you. And they have to accept your ideas as being just as valid as theirs.
Right.
So totally
Even
agree.
if sometimes they're not.
And just a couple of practical things I'd add too. Don't lead with the senior and deliver with the junior who hasn't done the research.
Oh, that drives me nuts.
I mean, we've all been there.
Talk
Please
talk
don't.
about that some more,
Just,
because everyone.
because
That
the junior
is-
is great, but please know my business. Like, please know at least the vocabulary of my business. At least have put as much time as I did into learning my new category, because I don't think you've always worked for BevMo and worked in beverages, and you haven't always worked in enterprise software. And, we've all had to learn new vocabularies and new industries, and at least put that time in. And if you're going to have deliveries with juniors, have them in the room, give them the benefit of the doubt so they can learn and not be just parachuted in, would be an important thing. And I guess I'd like to be a bit contrarian about the big idea, because I'm a bit more on your side here, is that we work in the space where we get employees and customers to help our clients innovate, kind of like the P&G Connect and Develop, next generation, and while they're doing that, they're gaining insights, so, crowdsourcing ideas. And, ideas come fast and cheap, and you can have a million ideas that you can't implement. And we have had customers come to us with literally 10,000 ideas that have come in through various creative exercises, agency exercises, employee exercises that are not, they're not balanced, they haven't been put through constraints, and they're big blue sky ideas, they're wonderful, but then getting the organization to deliver on them, there's a log jam, and they can't, or they arbitrarily go and black box it in the boardroom and pick one, and it's a failure. Right, so I mean, I think it's, we all have that chill moment, and if it can be balanced with what you said, where it's actually implementable, that's the magic formula.
executable.
That's the magic formula,
That is the
right?
magic.
I think it's finding the balance, because I don't think
Yeah.
you want one or the other. And I think
Agree.
I mean, for us, it's we take the responsibility of being the brand manager, and you can't delegate that responsibility. And so I would rather have our agencies roam more freely, because I have plenty of people within the four walls of Visa who can actually help ground them if needed. And so, I mean, it's really, how do you find the right balance so you're not just, creating ideas, as you're saying, that don't really drive the business or don't go anywhere, versus, using that as a point of inspiration to drive the organization forward. So again, like most things in life, it's a balance.
I agree.
I love your don't bring in the junior people. I've mandated, like, if you're going to bring in a team to pitch me, you bring in the team that's going to work with me. And I'm sure you've all done that, but just FYI, don't do the bait and switch.
Because we feel badly for you when you're brought in at the last
'cause
minute
then
after
I'll-
you won the business. We
I
know
have
it's
a
not your
30-day
fault.
cancellation clause too, so I mean,
Yeah.
I can just say that's just not working for me.
Yeah.
And I've done that.
And I would say use the product. I mean, that's the other thing. And we've had.
Well, it's kind of hard where I'm at.
Francesca's got a
So
leg
maybe a
up.
little harder in
A little
SAP,
harder where
but go to the stores. I mean, we, again, our current agency worked in the stores. They put on this uniform and they worked and they sold wine and they
good for
sold, and
them.
all of a sudden they're like,
Awesome.
okay, this is a lot harder than we thought it was. And so I think that's just, I cannot stress enough, understand the product and the experience, whatever it is, because it's
Right.
easy to think you get it and then the reality of it is most often quite different.
I do think, though, I mean, when you're talking about juniors, though, is that I think we also have to remember that, especially when we're thinking about millennials and people who are sort of coming into the business and how we coach and mentor them, I think that they, in fact, will, they do. They live their life differently than we did. And the way that they interact with technology is completely different than the way that we do. I mean, it's much more organic and natural since they grew up with it. And so I think we have to remember that they also offer a point of inspiration or disruption into that process. And I think, again, they have an important role to play because experience is absolutely necessary to get an idea oftentimes launched, but sometimes that disruptive thinking comes from these people who think just in a completely different way than we do because they just were born with a technology that didn't exist when we were growing up.
I think we would all agree, but we would just say include them from the beginning. We
Yeah.
loved having junior
I'm just
people on
saying,
the
just
team.
put them on the team. I want
Put them on the team. Yeah, right from the
By
start.
the way, I test everything with my teenagers.
It's a good
Because-
test.
And I asked them many years ago, some of my teenagers, write down what you do on a day-to-day basis. It's like a test. And then I used that and brought that back into the business and said, this is where we need to be. So they're at the forefront. So always talk to the young folks.
That's awesome. I think that's good counsel for all of the agency people in the room who work on casting. Who's the cast who's going to go into this meeting? That it's okay to have junior people in the meeting. They don't have to stay
Absolutely.
home. They should be
Yeah.
part of the
They
mix,
should be there,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, that's good. So we talked about ideas, and is it the ideas the first thing? But you all got to the point of implementation. So it wouldn't be a conference without a stat. Gartner says by 2017, the CMO will spend more money on technology than the CIO will. So they're in getting a big idea that's experiential, that's multi-channel, that is reliant on some amount of data from the customer, the consumer. Getting that to market involves increasingly a lot of collaboration across channels. And so
CIO is my best friend.
all right, tell us more.
I wish Sharon wanted to go, but
Well, because, the rise of the CMTO, great article, right? Everyone should read that. You have to be technical, not just mathy. We've been selling our enterprise platform that, by the way, integrates to SAP PLM.
thank you.
We love
Thank you.
SAP. But we've never sold to a CIO. We've never sold to the IT department, and we're an enterprise platform. We've seen that change. It's either through the innovation office, the product office, sometimes human resources, because they're looking at tapping a global workforce for insights or things. But I think that the CIO and the CMO are becoming one. They're looking at driving their business forward, and as we all know, marketing and brand drive the business forward, and product is part of that overall mix. It's not about building a better mousetrap, right? I think we know that. So when someone asks me, who do you sell to? I can say, well, I can tell you who we don't sell to. We don't sell to IT. And whereas I've worked for other enterprise software firms in energy and telecommunications, et cetera, and the old days of the IT department being the barrier and being the gatekeeper, for us, it's just not there. Sometimes it will, as one of my colleagues is here, will slow us down because we have to do global, single sign-on tests and, pen tests and all these types of things. And can we go to the cloud or can we not go to the cloud? And is that secure enough? And where are you storing my data? And all these types of data governance questions that we have. But at the end of the day, we're selling to marketing, to product, and to human resources. Sometimes to the innovation office now.
And for us, being a company that has sold traditionally to IT and CIOs, we see this like right on the front lines. And so we are changing our marketing mix over the next several years to be focused on the function. So whether it's marketing as a function, the CMO will be selling to the CMO, we'll be selling to the head of HR, so chief people officer or whatever, CFO. We're going after the C-suite. It's not to say the CIO doesn't matter, because they absolutely matter. And then take out my other hat, which is I partner with the CIO and IT to make sure that it's implementable. So whatever we bring in, whether it's social metrics or a new CRM system, excuse me, we want to be able to partner with them because they need to give it access to all of our employees as well. So I wasn't kidding when I said they are my best friends, and they have been for several years when this trend started to evolve, where it's like I totally respect what they do, and if they listen and you partner with the CIO or the IT department, you've got, again, a win-win where you can go out and get something very fast and very quickly to give you results. That's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think it has to be both.
Yeah.
I mean, I spent a huge amount of time with our CIO. It's like managing a creative director, managing a CIO, I found, in many ways. And I think that actually the real win from an agency perspective is spending some time understanding the IT side. So when you bring the innovative ideas that leverage technology, make sure it's something that can plug into the existing infrastructure.
Exactly.
Because what ends up happening is you get a great idea from your agency or the marketing department, you take it to the CIO, and even if they want to help, they're like, look, we just physically, for whatever it is, this doesn't plug into this, or it's all in the execution on the IT side, and there's a lot of stuff. We have a CIO who's very a big picture thinker. So for us, it's getting it to across the finish line that's the challenge. It's not getting the idea sold in, it's just getting it done. But I do think what will need to evolve is that merger, not just on our side as a client in terms of IT and marketing, but really on the agency side. So having someone on the team who can speak and understand pretty quickly the roadmap that exists to say, okay, they could use this, this, and this. They can't use this. We think it's really cool, but it's just not going to fit in. And I would say the other thing is helping. One of the things that I really value is someone who can help me filter through what's just a buzz and what's real, because you can imagine we all get solicited.
Yeah.
I mean, if I answered every single solicitation, which I don't answer any of them, but if I did, it would be like a full-time job. And so I don't have the time to say, Foursquare is going to be hot, but Twitter is going to be a disaster, or whatever it is. And so I think one of the roles increasingly from an agency standpoint I look to is say, help me figure out what's actually going to be something sustainable that's a platform over time versus we spent all this time for one campaign and we can't replicate it again because it was a technology that just didn't work.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I would underscore that. I think I partner closely with the CIO, but I think the bigger opportunity is how we partner with the agencies and getting our partners to a place where they can really understand how we can use technology and specifically data to help inspire the work that we do together. And we spend a lot of time working with our agencies mining social data, search data. We then, because that is a really good indication of a consumer's intentions. So for instance, we think of Google as just a huge database of intentions. That's what people are intending to do. And we're lucky enough at Visa to sit on a lot of data about what actually happens, so consumers' actions. And so, really finding the intersection between those intentions and actions is where we can find really rich stories that can inspire content that can shift and shape consumer behavior. But we need partners who really understand how to think in that way. And that is still something I think agencies need to do more of. I think it's still definitely in process, or they're in the middle of that journey, and we would just invite them to continue to move further along that path.
And I think they need to, agencies and, well, all of us, we need to understand the new trends. I mean, like you said, Foursquare, a couple of years ago, you might have said, oh,
Yeah, right.
Gotta do it. Yeah.
gotta do it.
And
And
now
now
like,
Twitter,
yeah.
and so what's next? Is it Instagram, Pinterest, and there's a million more. Vine, I love looking at Vine. So, and we're not using it, by the way, but we should be. So, I mean, it's like you always have to keep abreast of those new trends and technology, and the CIO is the last one that's gonna tell you that Vine's hot, right?
That is
They are
true.
not gonna tell you that
That's very
because
true.
they're gonna be all about Microsoft and security.
Enterprise.
and enterprise.
Yep.
And they're in their box.
Yeah,
very true.
They have a role, right? They have to be that way.
Yep.
They have to secure the company's data or whatever. So we have to think, all of us, about what's next, and then help them to see how that can be secure, or work with them on that. But anyways, they're never going to look at the next trend and know it. We have to know it.
I think on the reverse side, we've had a bunch of stuff come in through IT, which has been great. Actually, but some of it's so ugly that I have issues looking at it. They're trying to show me this system. I'm like, couldn't they just put a better UI on it?
Well,
So I
they've done
think
that
people
too.
who are
Yeah.
in on the B2B side, using your agency to help just make it, just put a few colors and get rid of the ugly boxes, goes a long way, because all I'm thinking about is I have to have all these other people that use it who really want the plug and play version, and I'm translating in between. I think there's a role for agencies that work on the B2B side to really bridge that gap from the IT side to the marketer as well.
Well, and I think the other big thing, the trend that's happening now, it's just fascinating to be on both sides, right? Because I am a vendor, but I'm also, in marketing. So the big trend is the vendors are going after the CIO and saying, hey, get me in with that CMO. Do you know the CMO? Because get me in. And so, but they show up with the worst kind of software interfaces and everything. But it's fascinating to see that now, where I've been on both sides, and it is about the user interface and the user experience, and again, back to the mobile first. But it's a sell that's going on right now every day, and Gartner is absolutely correct. It's probably going to happen sooner than 2017.
Right.
There's some predictions that the CIO will work for the CMO someday.
Of course.
That'll be,
Well,
you don't want it, but it may happen.
And Ingrid, I think if we go back to your original point, it's just that digital is in every single function within the company, and the people who are in smart companies running those functions are really savvy about digital. And so, it's no longer where, 1990 style, where you had, the MIS people who managed the
In their
management
computer
room,
information,
right.
you know, and it was all about, you know, the 5-year development cycle and, you know, what we were going to do. I mean, you know, it's just really, really changed.
It's a big shift right now.
And when we
yeah.
noticed that the IT people, to your point, have really partnered with all of those departments internally, it's a delight to go in and they're actually helping you. They're helping you
Yep.
in terms of, you know, did you think about perhaps integrating, you know, with our SharePoint system in a different way, you know, as an example, or, you know, utilizing another add-on that SAP has available to make something, you know, more useful. So
Yeah.
it can be really good, but no
Yeah.
more gatekeeper. Like the CIO isn't the bad guy anymore who's
No, you
stopping
need to be
innovation.
their friend.
Yeah, well, and they
And
know
help
that.
them, and they need to be yours. They need to understand your point of view.
And I think we're on a topic that I think, you know, from a communication standpoint is really interesting because, you know, we certainly are in this new people-powered economy, and, you know, never before have consumers had so much access to information, which we're all trying to unlock or get to them. And, you know, the source of information oftentimes is other people. And the shift has moved from the brand in many cases to the consumer. And I think, you know, again, you know, in terms of from a communication standpoint or what we would love to see from our agencies is thinking about that shift, embrace it, and help us navigate through it. Because oftentimes it's now about what the consumer will do and think and how they'll take our content and distribute it for us, you know, what we call earned reach. And you know, we need to lead with earned reach, and you know, our partners need to be thinking about it in that context. So, you know, what's a CPU, a YOU? You know, what's the cost per that individual, and engaging with them, getting them that data that inspires the content that they would then share, which creates this earned reach. You know, it sort of transcends the old world of CPCs and CPMs. So, you know, again, it's all inextricably linked with the CIO and with data, and you know, how that turns into communications.
Excellent. Well, let's switch gears and talk about women. That's why we're here, I guess. There's been a lot of hot debate so far today about the role of gender. Hot debate on Twitter, hot debate in the room, lots of good questions about women in leadership and why we're here today. So it's been a big year. There's leaning in, there's leaning out, there's to telecommute, not to telecommute, some pretty big hot issues. So we're curious, has your organization changed in the last year when it comes to like women-focused programs from a policy perspective? Is that a yes? Are there any things that you're doing differently, sort of tied to the zeitgeist?
Diversity is and always has been important to us. And when I was thinking about coming here, you know, I was in my staff meeting on Monday, and there were 8 of us on my leadership team, and there's just one white American male, and that's me. And I'm really proud of that, because if you looked back 3 years ago, it would have been a very different profile. And there are 3 women. There's somebody from India, born and raised in India, somebody born and raised from Argentina, somebody born and raised in Singapore, somebody who was born and raised in Argentina. And I think it's the diversity, and certainly we're here specifically about women, and I think that's an important part of how we create more diversity within our companies throughout every level. And I think it's a challenge. I think, you know, if it wasn't a challenge, then this conference wouldn't exist. And so it's about focusing on that issue, you know, specifically women, but diversity in general. And you just have to be unrelenting in the pursuit of creating it, because there's no other way to make it happen.
It is funny being in marketing. Sometimes I've been accused of having the all-women club, as sometimes I've had only women on my staff. Now it's interesting, I only have men on my staff. So not only, but majority are men, but they're not from the U.S. Actually, they're all from outside of the U.S. But it is an interesting dilemma. I think telecommuting, I've been telecommuting for 8 years from a different state. So I come back and forth, 4 kids. I mean, it's like, I think you have to prove that it can be done, and prove to your direct manager or whoever that you can get results no matter where you are, because back to the mobile world, mobile first, we're on all the time. I don't know about all of you, but I'm on my smartphone every day of the week, every minute of the day, it seems. And so it doesn't matter where you are. And I don't think that should be an issue anymore. I'm not sure if it is on the agency side, but on our side, we totally embrace flexibility in the workplace, because we're working 7 days a week depending on, the crisis of the day or the big announcement or the big launch or, so-and-so wants this. So we've got to be flexible. We've got to allow people to go home and do a soccer game with their kid or a birthday party or what have you, and or we're never going to be able to retain anyone. So flexibility is really key. So
I think the old joke of, we're totally flexible. You can work any 8-10 hour day as a day that you choose to work. Sort of goes. We're a startup. Our CEO and founder, Shelley Kuipers, this is my third company working with her. We've got quite a few women in senior positions in our company, men. But just reflecting here, we also have people who represent 4 different decades of age. We have people in their 20s, 30s, 40s, and 50s in a small company, and people who have lived in different places, speak different languages. So diversity is really key. I think the thing that's really shifted for us this year is we really, you and I talked a little bit before, when we meet a client that is a great client of ours, we know we're going to have a lot of that synchronicity that you talked about. We support them 24/7, and it just gets blended into our lives. So I've woken up at 2 in the morning for a conference call with South Africa, just like I've left at 11 o'clock in the morning to go on a vacation and do something fun and take some time off. And then, maybe getting a bit of Wi-Fi at a Starbucks somewhere so that I can take a conference call. And so it's sort of what Guy Kawasaki talked about. I don't see those barriers anymore.
Yeah.
I'm in my 50s, and I just live a digital lifestyle and a digital work style. And when it's flowing, it's really awesome. So the thing I think that's shifted for us is we just go with our instincts, really find clients and collaborators that we get that great, they get the bumps on the back, the goosebumps, because it's going to be a great experience. And then when that blends in with that 24/7 lifestyle, it's great. So
It's
telecommuting,
fun.
it sounds very 1990s.
It
I don't
sounds
know.
very old.
It does. Like it uses a telephone. That's,
Although I will
yeah.
say,
Dial it up.
one of my experiences with a very large corporation where I headed up marketing for their software division, and kind of the size of SAP, this was a specialty company. I helped set up a telecommuting role for a gentleman who's become a very good friend of mine, who, because of personal circumstances, needed to be able to live and work from 2 different places. The day I left, the new guy canceled it. Right, and he had to choose where he was going to live, and he left the company. And this was, the equivalent of, getting your rock star, working way below his capability because of the flexibility, and he liked the team he was working with, and that was canceled. Today, gosh, I hope that doesn't happen anymore.
I don't think that happens today, but that happened to me. I quit because I couldn't. They wouldn't let me work 1 day a week from home with 2 small kids at the time, and I was like, I'll work from home and I'll consult, and I doubled my paycheck and worked half the time.
It's a good
and
plan.
had 2 more kids, so it was great.
Our industry, so our company has pretty balanced male-female, so it's not, probably a few more men. Our industry is very old school, so just to give you a flavor of what I mean when I say old school, I walk into meetings, all men. I'm the head of marketing for one of their biggest customers, and I'll have a 60-year-old guy be like, "Hey, sunshine, what's up?" I'm like, I let it go. It's very entertaining, but that just gives you a flavor. When I say old school, I mean really old school. And so it's interesting. I think the recent sort of past year with all of Sheryl Sandberg's book, et cetera, I think it's hasn't really changed us in the company, but it's definitely, I think, as a woman in a leadership role, has made me more sensitive to make sure I take the time to reach out to women who don't necessarily work for me, that happens all the time, but who are at our suppliers or other part of the industry, our agencies, et cetera, and just help them and open up that dialogue. Because I forget sometimes, it hasn't really been an issue for me, quite frankly, because I've worked in very male-dominated industries for a long time, but my situation is not the same as your situation. And so I've definitely become much more conscious of taking the time to just reach out. Someone has a baby, say, "Hey, how's it going coming back from maternity leave?" People, who are 3 steps removed, they work for, like I said, a supplier or something. And I've been amazed at how appreciative that is, because their 3 or 4 bosses are either not aware, not interested, or just haven't thought about it, or not married, don't have kids, et cetera. So for us, it hasn't been much more of a company thing, but definitely a personal thing has been a increased awareness to just take 5 minutes and make that phone call, reach out, ask the question. And I've been actually surprised how many people are like, "God, I can't believe you did that." So it's been good, and a good reminder, I think, for me.
That's great.
Yeah, I'm doing the same thing, but I'm kind of loosely mentoring men and women of all ages and whatever, and really trying to help them through their careers. I've just opened up my door to anybody that wants to come in. And if they're brave enough to talk to me, I will give them very harsh advice. I mean, I'll tell them I've observed this about you or whatever. And I also have told a couple of people, leave the company if you're that unhappy. Let's go. And they won't leave. They have
Don't
to
come
make
to your office anymore.
they have to make some
Stay off that
adjustments.
floor.
Door number 2.
Yeah.
They make some
Exactly.
adjustments. But it's good. We have to give back. I feel like
I
I need
agree.
to give back at this point and
Yeah.
want to do more.
So our last topic before we just open up to a couple of questions, you talked about bravery and the power of negative feedback, which I think we know. What are those attributes that equal a leader or potential leader? There were a couple of comments this morning about how in advertising your career is over at 40. So I'm more worried than I ever was, I guess.
Don't be. You're doing
I know,
fine.
right? So many. I know, Deb, you're worried. We'll stop telling each other our ages. So but what is it? There's a title, and sometimes women can equal title. Title must mean I'm a leader, or lack of title must mean I'm not a leader. Is it bravery? Is it confidence? What is it?
I think it's purpose. I mean, that would be one. I don't know if there's any one answer, but I think having a purpose that is really meaningful to yourself, that you can really own. It's not somebody else's purpose. It's not something that you put on that somebody else has created for you. I think that is oftentimes the best inner compass you can have as a leader. I'd say that's one. And the other is also understanding that a leader doesn't always mean that you're out in front. In fact, oftentimes more effective leaders are leaders who are comfortable being in the middle and even being in the back. And so really understanding that there are different types of leadership that are required for different types of situations, I think is, that's what I actually, when I look for, young people and their potential, it's people who can really understand that and can modulate their leadership style and have that inner compass. I think that's, a wonderful thing to have.
I think, who was the first speaker with rule number 1? Was that Nancy in the last session?
I think so.
Yeah, and I wrote down, because she was saying, we're too compliant, we say yes, we don't know how to say, like, be honest. Honesty. Follow that inner compass and say it. Say it and be true to yourself, and that way you'll be true to everyone else. So sometimes that's bravery, sometimes that's confidence, but be completely honest, right? And then people will follow, and people will look to you with respect. That's
Awesome.
what I think.
So I'll have a couple of funny ones then. Those are very good answers. Ask for the title.
Yes.
Ask for the title. Don't let the person before you leave who was a director or a vice president and you get team lead.
You have to grow into it.
Yeah, and it's like you're good enough, ask for the title.
good
I
advice.
mentor lots of young women, and my friend Brooke, who's sitting here, who works with me, knows I say, negotiate like you're a 52-year-old white male who's divorced and remarried with 2 sets of kids and 2 houses, and you get out there and negotiate.
Awesome.
And I'll tell you, if you got to put on your inner George and just get in there and ask for it, do it. Because I have a really good friend, Laura, whose last name I won't mention. If she sees this, she'll know who she is. She was told title wasn't important. She had to leave a very successful career in a multinational and move to another one because the glass ceiling hit her right in the head when she took a non-directional title and was told, you'll grow into it and we'll mentor you. I was lucky
Never
enough to have some male mentors, a gentleman named Stuart, whose name, I should say, Stuart O'Connor, awesome guy. He said, I'm going to go and I'm going to coach you and I'm going to help you negotiate this next step in your career. And he was a lawyer in a former career, president of our software company when we were acquired. And he got me in at a band level, not a, you all know what bands are in companies when you get to that. And that really was a big step in my career. So title does not make a leader. They're excellent answers. But don't shy away from the title. Own it and speak it proudly when you are
more than that.
chief marketing officer or whatever you end up being.
More than that, back to the honesty thing, ask for the compensation
that goes with it.
I'm not buying that last one where it's like it's going to take 98 years. My
Yeah.
God, you are all going to be dead.
Right. Right. I
We-
do watch Mad Men.
so-
We saw what happened when she got the copywriter role, right? The salary didn't come with
No,
it.
you got to ask for it. And I'll tell you, in my last two, hopefully, HR is not here, my last two jobs. So I got remarried, so I've been divorced and all of that, so been through the wars.
Negotiate like you're Ingrid then.
So, no, I got remarried. My husband, my new husband, said, you've got to ask for it. He's an executive in the Valley as well. You go in there, and he taught me. No one ever told me this. Go ask for this, bring in your last offer letter, and tell them that's what you need, at least at a minimum, and go higher. And it works.
Awesome.
Amazingly, it works, because if you have conviction, honesty, inner compass,
And you're worth it.
and
You're
you're
doing the
worth
right
it.
thing.
That's very good advice.
It took me 50 years to get there, but I got it.
I got it at about
Ask
45.
for it.
So
So you all need to ask for it. We all need to ask for it. Do not take no or leave. What's the worst thing that can happen? Get another job,
yep.
and they'll pay.
Yeah, I think for me, I don't know where we ended up in the asking for the time.
It's cool.
A different question, but I'm 100% on board.
Go into the
I
offer.
agree, nobody
Ask for
asks.
it.
I think, and I've given that advice, just ask. The worst they can do is say no, and then you're a grown-up and you can evaluate
You
yes or
decide.
no, but asking isn't a bad thing. I think there's two ways to think about it. I think leadership, being a good leader, has nothing to do with title, and I think how you develop as a leader is all about the ability to have vision and execute at the same time, all the time. It's about your ability to collaborate, and most of all, it's your ability over time to identify talent that complements you. That, to me, is leadership, in a 3-second soundbite. How to make sure you have the right perception of being a leader in an organization is a whole different ballgame, because some organizations are merit-based and they'll see you and they'll promote you. Others, it is about the title. I mean, I'm in an organization that's somewhat hierarchical now, and someone on my team will be like, I tried to get this through, I walk over, and just because I walk over, all of a sudden it magically gets done, which is ridiculous. So I think you have to understand what organization you're in, and title does matter from a perception standpoint. It does. It doesn't make you a good leader.
Clients too, right?
I do. So title does matter, so go for the ask every single time if you can, because it won't make you a good leader, but it'll help with the perception versus reality
open the
issue.
doors.
I do think also, make sure you take time to, one of your questions that you didn't bring up is sort of what was one of the biggest things we learned early on. And
do
I
we have
think
time to do
I
that?
thought about
That's
this
a good
answer
one.
a lot, actually. And for me, the biggest thing is don't forget who's selling your product, not just who's buying your product. And I could say in almost every organization, you have a sales force or retail sales associates or whatever you do. And the best leaders I know spend time with that organization and help them understand. And if that organization is telling you you're a great, telling others in the organization you're a good leader, that is just magical. It's amazing. And I think so many people, particularly in marketing, they spend all their time with the customer, forget to spend all the time, it's like, who cares if the customer, if your sales guy or sales girl hasn't bought into it, like the customer's never gonna see it. So I think I would say one of the questions is how to manage your perception as a leader, if you're a good leader, is spend time with those constituencies, because similar to social media, sort of the buzz in the organization about, oh my God, so-and-so came out and worked the sales force with me or whatever, that is really helps your perception as a leader. And I think there is a difference between being a real leader and a perception. Those don't always get, you have to think about both, I think, all the time.
Yeah.
Whoever's minding time, do we have 5 more minutes? Or know who?
Nobody, so.
Nope.
Well,
you're
nobody's
getting
here. Just
Don't ask for permission.
exactly.
How about let's just close with just a couple of stories. Is that okay? Just a couple of quick stories. Because we did talk about a question about like what? Yeah, no, not any of
Any
those
stories?
stories. No, just a lesson. How about a lesson you learned early in your career that's formative? Oftentimes we learn something in our first job that we carry with us. That's either a cautionary tale or something I'll do every time. What is it? You don't have to have one, but if you happen to have one.
For a con executive at Foot Cone and Belding many years ago, a woman manager told me this. She said, I'm going to tell you 4 things that I want you to remember the rest of your career, and I still remember them to today, and I still use them. It was based on, she had observed me in a certain situation. She's like, show up, pay attention, tell the truth, and don't predefine the outcome. And I found those 4 simple rules to guide me throughout my many-year career in marketing. And I love that it came from a woman. Veronica Buxton was her name, because we're here celebrating women.
Awesome.
So.
Thanks, Kevin.
Mine's pretty long, but I'll try and make it brief. High school physics class, I asked a question. The teacher said, you know, I don't know why you're asking a question. You're going to be a housewife anyways.
Ah.
I'm sure you've all had something like that. So that was the challenge, right? So a few years later, out of college, local tech company I'm working at as a software developer, and the chief of the department says, hey, we're bringing in some high school teachers for the summer. And he brings up, I go, which high school? Which teachers? They name the name, and I'm like, I basically had an attack in the back of the room. And my manager, so this is the manager, you know, the big guy. He goes, what's wrong with Ingrid? Only woman in the room, by the way, of 35 developers. And then my manager says, and he stands up for me and he goes, because I said, that's the one. And he goes, that was her high school physics teacher that said X to her, right? And the guy picks up the phone and he calls HR and he says, we won't be needing him this summer.
Wow.
Wow.
And I think for me, it was the defining moment of do the right thing, right? Men do the right thing all the time. They do the right thing. They didn't have to do that. I mean, but it meant so much to me, and it's made it like this equal level playing field your whole life, you know, because I've walked in rooms because I'm in tech, for years with men and men and men, and it's like we do the right thing. It's back to that, just get it done, right? So I just really applaud that. Mm-hmm. That leader, that was a leader.
It's a leader.
And that was like doing the right thing.
Quick thing of advice that I heard from a woman who used to head up, I can't remember her name because it was quite a few years ago, but head up marketing for Continental Airlines. And at the time, she came to talk to women working in tech and in marketing in the company I was working at. And she first of all advised us that this was the hardest company that she had ever consulted to, because she was a global consultant by then, for a woman to work. I agreed. Very, very difficult company. But she said, but the problem is women think that by working hard, they'll get recognized. And that by working hard, they're going to get the promotion. You know, it's this idea of putting your nose to the grindstone, period. And her advice was what we heard before, of you've got to be able to package your ideas, you've got to be able to find champions for your ideas, you've got to work your ideas. And so my advice that I give to young people who go out into the world and then come back, I'm also a marketing professor from time to time, they come back, is I say, read Seth Godin's book called Free Prize Inside. It will tell you how to have a good idea and not get fired for it. How to work the room, how to find champions, how to get your company to do things that are different, or your client, and not get fired for it. Because it sounds counterintuitive when you're young, but people get fired for having too many good ideas in companies, right? Because they're upsetting the apple cart. And so it's your job to be your own agent in a company, not just working harder and doing all the stuff we heard from the speakers before us about taking that on and saying yes.
Awesome.
So.
Francesca, any closing thoughts?
My story is a little bit long-winded, so I probably won't go there. But I do think that the biggest thing I would say is make sure you really enjoy what you're doing. My first job, I was in sales. Everyone says, why do you think you ended up being good at marketing? I was like, because I started in sales. And I worked for the E&J Gallo Winery. And anybody who knows about Gallo, you work really, really hard, and they're really scary. And it was very hard few years, but awesome. But I remember my second manager was a woman. She was one of the only women at Gallo. And we just had a great relationship, and we laughed a ton. And people were always so shocked that in this sort of crazy, intense sweatshop that we worked in, we managed to just laugh a lot and have a lot of fun. And that sounds like such a silly thing to do, but I'd ask all of you to think about when was the last time you laughed a lot with the people that you work with. And if you find yourself not doing that, you're probably in the wrong place. And so I laugh a lot. Some of the people I work with are sitting here in the front row. And I think it's such a silly thing, and people say that as like a Hallmark card kind of statement, but I find so many people similar to you come into my office and they're so unhappy. I'm like, then change. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just a job. You can find another one. And so I would just say that's all this conversation about women and being successful. A lot of times, if you're happy in what you're doing, 80% of the people around you are probably not that happy, so you will be more successful than them because they're just happy with what you're doing. And it sounds really silly, but it really does. It has totally paid off for me. It helps that we can drink at work. That's part of what makes it happy. So that's good. So if we're having a really bad day, we can do a wine tasting. Awesome. So that does help keep everybody happy. But I would say just really, don't forget to have a little fun along the way, because we spend a lot of time doing what we're doing, and it's easy to take ourselves too seriously in the process. So.
Awesome. Thank you for coming to the panel. Thank you so much.